Hello there, so Osoo is the kind of game that inherently looks cool thanks to the contrast between its simple concept and its not so simple execution. When seeing high-level Osoo gameplay for the first time, all my concentration was required just to understand how the cursor moved and how objects were clicked. Even though I move my mouse and type with my keyboard every day. It seemed humanly impossible to do this stuff, yet I quickly learned about tons of proof saying otherwise. On YouTube, the most popular type of Osoo content is high-level gameplay. More specifically, screen-captured replays of impressive scores, uploaded to either an unofficial hub channel or to an individual player's personal channel. For most people, the experience I described earlier comes about from watching a simple YouTube video like this, which only covers a small portion of the actual content. While YouTube may house the highlights, Twitch is the home for the hours of content surrounding those highlights. Live streams reveal the more human side of high-level Osoo gameplay through a streamer's shortcomings and community interaction. That stuff small clips of the best scores could never provide. As far as I can tell, Twitch is the main place for Osoo video content. A good portion of top players live stream there, and they receive a sizable number of viewers while doing so. Seeing the success of so many Osoo streamers and how interesting their content is has influenced tons of other players to give it a go too. YouTube may appeal to the fleeting casual audience, but the more dedicated audience lives on Twitch. So, most Osoo video content comes from high-level gameplay and live streams. That being said, my approach towards creating Osoo video content is rather out of place. As of today, I've uploaded one YouTube mapping video every week for the past year straight. 52 weeks of uploading a less appealing form of Osoo-related entertainment, which covers mapping topics that hold absolutely no interest to the majority of the game's player base. At the start, there was no telling how valuable my content would be since it defied the established norms of Osoo entertainment, yet it still has gone better than I ever imagined. Tons of people watch this stuff and find it worthwhile. If I had to mention one regret about the content I make though, it would have to be how impersonal it can sometimes feel. Restricting myself to only 10 or so minutes every week to discuss a specific mapping topic and its various branching ideas doesn't leave much room for personal investment on your part. Of course, I incorporate my experiences which make these videos as unique to me as possible, but that's still limiting on its own. Some of you might have been watching these videos for the past year, yet you probably don't know the first thing about me. Streamers spend hours per week talking directly to their audience about whatever's on their mind at the time, whereas I've only made 8 hours worth of video over an entire year. These videos are immensely more concise than any live streamer's ramblings, but still, those ramblings are what help flesh out a person beyond just being an Osoo content creator. And of course, that's just due to a difference in intended appeal. Osoo live streams aim for entertainment through a more personal experience, while my videos aim for entertainment through a more disconnected experience. I feel like it's about time we change that though. Well, sort of. I don't plan on streaming or even changing the content that I regularly create. Just for this 1-year anniversary video though, or more like podcast honestly, it may be more appropriate to talk a little bit about myself for once. You know me as the guy who plays a game and has made YouTube videos about it for the past year, but my experiences with gaming and making gaming videos stretch back much further than that. And I think if you've enjoyed listening to my Osoo content for so long, you may be interested in knowing that bit of history too. So for the next hour or so, let's talk a little bit about why I make Osoo mapping videos. I talk to a lot of people who could be classified as gamers. People with hundreds of games in their Steam libraries who are always interested in stuff like E3, the newest game releases, the evolution of game development companies, and so on. I spend a lot of my time playing games, so I'm often grouped together with this crowd, but with my gaming habits, I feel I couldn't be any more separated from them. It doesn't take a genius to realize I'm obsessed with Osoo. In more ways than one, it's become the main thing I spend my time on. I create maps, mod maps from others, participate in events, moderate as a QAT, manage top secret stuff, write, record, and edit videos about mapping, and most rarely, I play the game. With so much to potentially keep me busy, I haven't had a situation in the last year where I could even consider being bored. There's always just too much of my mind being occupied by this game, nearing levels of undiagnosed autistic devotion. Really, it's hard to even say that jokingly given the reasons I just listed off a few seconds ago, and more so with the knowledge that Osoo isn't the first game with which I've experienced this. Unhealthy fixation is how I've always played games. When I was 4 years old, I received a Super Nintendo for Christmas with one game, Super Mario All-Stars. A few days later though, my parents told me the Grinch stole the Super Nintendo because I'd played it too much. Consoles were from then on banned in the household for both me and my sister. Computers were a different story at least. After years of surviving on Roller Coaster Tycoon and low-quality Flash games, stories of which I'll omit for my own sanity, I found a game which actually managed to hook me. A game which I spent thousands of hours as a middle schooler playing, and in the same vein as Osoo, dedicated all my spare time to in as many different ways as possible. X Modo. X-Moto is a basic 2D side-scrolling motorbike game inspired by some other 2D side-scrolling motorbike game. The goal of every level is to collect a bunch of items, then reach the finish line in as short of a time as possible. If the biker guy runs into something or tips over, then it's game over. And 1,000 other games could fit that description too. Great. What kept X-Moto engaging to me for so long wasn't its premise, but rather what more the game offered to anyone willing to go the extra mile and participate in its community of players. Assuming you're an Osoo player, I shouldn't need to explain that a game as simple as this can be more interesting than it appears. Osoo is, after all, a game that could be boiled down to just clicking circles to the beat. Despite being completely different genres of games, Osoo and X-Moto share a surprising amount of similarities in how they maintain interest for those who stick around long enough. First off, X-Moto was competitive. To an extremely small degree. During the time frame I was most active, 2007 to 2010, the game had around 100 players total interested in competing, and I doubt more than 1,000 players who played it as more than just another 2D motorbike game. Within that small group of players was still a competitive scene though, and unlike my experiences with Osoo, I was part of it. X-Moto had a player ranking system somewhat comparable to Osoo's PPV1. It valued number 1 scores on different levels over anything, though unlike performance points, it wasn't really trying to sort players by skill. It was just a quantitative measure. Whoever had the most number 1 scores, meaning the fastest times on the highest number of different levels, was the number 1 player. Whoever had the second most number 1 scores was the number 2 player, the third most number 3, and you get the idea. New players were left completely devoid of a ranking system, which might have contributed to why so few people played X-Moto. They never found a reason to dedicate themselves to the game long enough, but for those actively competing, even this simple system was entertaining enough. It allowed people to challenge each other through time trials on a huge variety of levels, each requiring different skill sets far more variable than those seen in Osoo. Additionally, there were some other categories to compete in as well if the one featured in-game wasn't enough, though they were pretty lackluster. Statistics were cool at least, like I can see my oldest record still standing is from about 2,600 days ago. Anyway, what this ranking system gave life to was a close-knit group of players all interested in this one niche of the internet, X-Moto. In such a small group, everyone playing for the best times and levels knew each other. There were famous old players, uprising new players, those with different skill sets, those who prioritized cool scores, those capable of finding new level strategies, and anything else you could possibly imagine. Everyone had clear strengths over others, and that showed in how they competitively played the game. It was a lot of fun, though for me and most other people involved, competition was by no means the appeal of X-Moto. What the vast majority of dedicated X-Moto players eventually turned to was the more interesting side of the game, mapping. Or, well, level making, I guess. Every game has its own jargon, and for whatever reason, the word level was more often used than map among X-Moto players. I'm gonna call it mapping though, just for simplicity's sake. Anyway, maps were made through a basic vector art program called Inkscape, wherein players installed a plugin to convert shapes to textured blocks in-game, add sprites, incorporate basic Lua scripts, and a few other basic features. It was really easy to get the hang of, which is probably why X-Moto mapping was so popular among its players. And given how much freedom this editor provided, mappers could push the game to its limits with ease. Mapping in X-Moto went through phases similar to those of Osoo. It began with an era of classical maps designed with straight lines attached to a grid because, prior to Inkscape, the level editor didn't allow for much else. It then went through phases of more aesthetically oriented maps, since curves became a possibility and managing background and foreground layers was no longer a pain. Later maps began a shift towards more strict, mechanics-based levels. When first learning how to play, it becomes apparent that falling over or running into objects with the biker guy leads to a game over, but it's actually a little more specific than that. The head is the only part of the biker guy that matters. The rest of the body can penetrate objects all at once, leading to some pretty unintuitive level design. That being said, instead of maps being made with wide open landscapes to drive a motorbike on, players were plopped into tiny abstract boxes or the middle of a mass of noodles, requiring minimal error with key presses and maximum abuse of the game's simple premise. From these grew massive mazes of levels which hardly reflected what you might consider a 2D motorbike game. Before competing on these maps, players had to figure out first how to actually pass them. It was like putting a puzzle game and a biking game in one. You can imagine how those later types of maps affected the casual player base of the game. All its new content was impossible to comprehend for anyone not already invested, making for a pretty unappealing first-time experience for anyone downloading the game's newest levels. Like, older maps focus on being playable for a wide audience, while newer maps focus on making the game more fun for the other guys already into the game. This was a poor regulation of newcomer-friendly content, which Osoo has under control well enough, and that might have contributed to the game's eventual decline in audience. Maybe it was just that the game was boring to a lot of people though. I'm only speculating based on what I've experienced here. As an Xmodo mapper, I created well over 100 levels, and that's where the majority of Xmodo's appeal was for me. I was able to create something cool, then log onto the game's public in-game chat server and ask the other guys playing to check out what I'd done. We'd both enter the same level, and I'd be able to watch them in real time, like the equivalent of an Osoo test play. If I thought the map was good enough, I could also submit it as an addition to the game's official library of downloadable content, which worked in almost the same way as Osoo does today. While Osoo has beatmap nominators, Xmodo had level validators. They essentially had the same job, reviewing submitted maps and either accepting or rejecting them from official status. There was also a ranking criteria of sorts, though due to how small the game was and how everyone could communicate with each other easily, it was mostly decided upon through spoken word. Rules like maps must be humanly passable and a player entity cannot spawn within a block, along with guidelines like avoid luck-based gameplay and maps should meet a subjective level of visual quality, were what made up Xmodo's ranking criteria. There were also people in charge of modding called commenters who would comment on submitted maps with feedback further supporting this ranking criteria stuff. After establishing myself as a mapper in Xmodo, I eventually moved up to become a commenter and later on a level validator as well. It was a really cool volunteer job, which was probably too much power for a 13-year-old like me. While in the position, drama similar to Osoo mapping arose, like concerns over visuals not mattering and gameplay being the #1 priority, standards generally being too inconsistent for what could be validated, and the most well-known mappers having no trouble pushing through the system. All the flack mappers, modders, and the ranking system receive on Osoo are things I've experienced with Xmodo, just on a much, much smaller scale. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap between Osoo and Xmodo. More than there should be, actually. The hardest map in the game, which is the only one known past to this day, is titled with a direct reference to Hollowings' Osoo map of Sentimental Skyscraper, which was ranked shortly before this one on Xmodo was validated. The weird part is, the map's not even made by me. It's just... well, I'll talk about that later. Anyway, it should go without saying that Xmodo was a pretty important game to me. There's just so much about it that I found appealing, most notably its community-oriented and creative aspects, which have continued to appeal to me through Osoo today. Those charms were what every game I'd played up to this point lacked, a sense of community. I mean, there's probably a community of hardcore people surrounding every game out there, and level creation and level promotion systems aren't exclusive to Osoo and Xmodo either, but regardless, Xmodo was the first time I'd ever experienced something like this firsthand. It was a game that I loved, and even though I don't find it nearly as appealing now since, well, it's pretty dead, also the reason I talked about it in the past tense, it makes me sad to know that nobody else will ever get to know what I found so cool about a cheap 2D motorbike game. Until now, I guess, but it's not like I can cover all my thoughts on Xmodo in just a few minutes of this podcast/video thing. I mean, I played this game for thousands of hours. It's literally impossible to compact everything I found interesting about it into one small package. There's over 3,000 levels in the game total, and I could easily talk for hours about what makes some of my favorites special to me. Like, for example, the level called Mastering Perfection was the first to, in my opinion, perfect the evolving meta of precise movement and gameplay mechanics abuse. It was made by a guy named tyttö, a mapper dedicated to creating some of the hardest maps in the game, who basically showed mappers how to design hard yet fair maps through his 10-part series on scaling difficulty and its various offshoots. tyttö's mapping style influenced me for sure, and his influence mostly came from a mapper and player named Philip, known for creating the hardest maps and earning some of the most impressive scores in the early years of Xmodo. Most players thought he had moved on from the game after not setting a score for over a year, but out of nowhere, he came back under a new alias, uploading 38 different rank 1 scores on some of the game's hardest maps on the same day. That's all information I find interesting to think about, like the maps making up the game, what makes them stand out, their influence, who they were created by. All of that is stuff that I've somehow found worth remembering over 8 years later, yet it would have been lost to time if it wasn't said here. There's just too much about Xmodo that I find interesting, and probably more that I found interesting that I've forgotten by now. Again, it makes me sad knowing that Xmodo is just going to be another niche of the internet that's forgotten, especially when I now know I could have easily prevented that with videos. Although, really, I wouldn't have trusted my middle school self to do it justice. I could barely write a sentence without screwing up grammar, let alone organize my thoughts on everything that made this video game special to me. Instead, I just played the game, enjoyed my time in the community, made some maps, and eventually faded away from it as my interest shifted elsewhere during the transition between middle school and high school. Yes, we're talking about Call of Duty. You already know what it is, one of the most popular first-person shooter franchises of all time, primarily played by a bunch of kids. Like me, tons of people my age now probably experienced Call of Duty in the same way I did. I visited some classmates' house and we played either World at War in 7th grade or Modern Warfare 2 in 8th grade, both the newest titles in the series for their respective years. Local split screen and a free-for-all deathmatch was the best way to play together, and for what it was enjoyable. A fun party game, I guess, but nothing beyond that in my eyes. Xmoto was the game I truly enjoyed every facet of, while Call of Duty was just a casual pastime with friends. That started to change midway through 8th grade though, when my classmates named Chris showed me an app on his fancy new iPod Touch, the official spin-off of Call of Duty World at War's Nazi Zombies minigame. For whatever reason, this was a part of Call of Duty I hadn't really encountered much until this point. I had only played multiplayer since that's what all my other friends were into, but Nazi Zombies appealed to me in a different way. After playing this slow-paced mobile game longer than I should have, I decided to legally purchase the PC port of World at War. It may have only run at around 40 FPS on my sister's laptop, but hey, I was able to at least play the game in its true form. For those of you who never hopped onto the Call of Duty bandwagon, Nazi Zombies is the secret but not really secret game mode originally found in Call of Duty World at War. It was initially nothing more than just a bonus addition to the core game, which was a campaign mode through various World War II scenarios and a competitive online multiplayer arena that needs no explanation. Upon release, there was one map made available to players who made their way through the campaign. Its name, Undone, German for Night of the Undead. This test of sorts laid the simple foundation for the entire game mode, and that simplicity might have been what attracted me to the game so much. The loading video for Undone, Knocked from Here Onward, features a first-person view of a guy waking up near recent airplane wreckage, seeing slowly approaching figures, and getting presumably killed by a Nazi zombie. After which, the game actually begins. A player spawns in a room with a huge opening in front of them, blocked off by some metal bars and pieces of wood. Text saying Round 1 appears in the middle of the screen, which lowers to the bottom left, giving focus to that and the points counter on the right side. What this tells anyone is the round number, the first thing they see, is the goal, and the new addition of points can help them achieve that goal. Soon after making that connection, the empty window in front of the player should make its purpose clear by showcasing a zombie. The enemy. Kill zombies to progress through rounds, improve weaponry to manage the increasing number, speed, and health of enemies each round, and survive as long as possible. Anyone who's played this game knows how stupidly simple it is. A kindergartner could understand the essentials by just playing once. It's a game that progressively increases difficulty with no way to win and limited options to work with, and it's something I really like actually. It's a game more so about optimization. It encourages figuring out how to most effectively push through rounds without dying, and I personally find developing new and better strategies to be one of the most interesting parts of the game. With Undone, I learned how to better progress through rounds through trial and error, and with more official downloadable maps added soon after, I could be entertained even more. Verrucht, the first DLC, was an asylum featuring tons of new additions to the game. It was far larger, including a power switch and various new buyable aids for round progression. It also had a gimmick for co-op gameplay, faster zombie running and attacking speeds, and a bunch of other small extras that I really liked. Of course, this map still kept with the same premise as Knocked: kill zombies and progress through rounds in whatever ways were possible. Just Verrucht was a lot harder and had a few more gameplay opportunities to balance that. Shi no Numa, the second DLC, seemed to take a step in a new direction. While it still encouraged the same concept, survival until the end, and introduced more ways to do so like a new weapon, dogs, and randomized perk locations, it may have just been a little too easy. This map was the first one that let a player go outdoors, and it featured wide open areas where players could easily kite zombies without effort. Being the largest map to date, zombie spawn locations were designed differently too. Zombies only appeared in areas close to the player, and because only 24 zombies could be on the map at once, a player could just walk from one area to another and that would be the end. Players quickly realized that, in solo mode especially, this map was too easy. For whatever reason, playing alone maxed out the number of zombies per round at 24, unlike co-op which has no consistent maximum. High round players who understood these basic mechanics exploited them as much as possible, which led to some pretty clear amendments in the final DLC. Der Riese is the fan favorite. It's kinda just a perfect balance between difficulty and opportunity. The 24 zombies per round thing in stupidly wide open areas were now gone, and new elements mixed in kept gameplay engaging, most notably in my opinion because of dogs mid-round. The monotony of kiting was eliminated because at nearly all times, players needed to pay attention to an unknown factor which could easily screw up any strategy. This was probably the map everyone spent most of their time on in the World at War era, and I'd still consider it to be the most entertaining zombie map to this day. Despite growing so much in popularity between what was pretty much a public testing phase, Nocturne Toten, and a newfound peak, Doris, Nazi Zombies had a relatively small presence on YouTube. It's weird actually. Call of Duty videos were everywhere in 2010 since Let's Plays were making their way to the scene and Modern Warfare 2 was one of the most popular games at the time, yet Zombies was still treated as side content. For essentially all COD YouTubers, it was just an additional spice on top of their usual Call of Duty multiplayer gameplay. A major disappointment for me. I had no interest in Modern Warfare 2 or multiplayer in general. All I wanted to see was Nazi zombies, and there was nowhere on YouTube dedicated only to that. The closest thing I could find at the time was a channel called Next Gen Tactics, which despite uploading lots of multiplayer, had a fairly big focus on World at War's Zombies game mode. They uploaded high round strategies, which I didn't realize were terrible at the time, as well as challenges to enjoy the game in new ways. Stuff like camping specific rooms or trying to get the highest round in under an hour were examples of those Zombies challenges. They were self-established goals for a game that had no real ending, which gave it a little more variety than I experienced before. I tried out these challenges on my own and enjoyed my time playing the game with different mindsets, but just knowing that I was competing with one group, Next Gen Tactics, it seemed kinda lame. Playing for high rounds in general like everyone else seemed like the much more appealing thing. Anyway, with these videos, I still wasn't satisfied. There was no one on YouTube exclusively creating the content I was looking for. I knew that there must have been people out there like me who found zombies to be fun and multiplayer to be a bore, so I decided I would fix the problem. The YouTube channel you're listening to this from, pishifat, has been around for almost 10 years now. I created it at the start of October in 2007 and I used it to upload silly videos of my cat and family members, eventually followed by vlogs. Let's pretend those didn't happen. Over 3 years of casual usage, I understood a bit more about how YouTube worked though. Viewers subscribe to a channel in hopes of seeing a specific type of content. That's exactly what I wasn't able to get out of Next Gen Tactics. They uploaded Call of Duty, but not specifically Call of Duty Zombies. Nobody was filling the Nazi Zombies niche. Until the beginning of October in 2010, when I made a YouTube channel called Nazi Zombies Gaming. My intent should be obvious by now. I wanted a YouTube channel to exist which exclusively posted Call of Duty Zombies content. Other people out there must have been looking for something similar, so I tried to make content that I, someone who just wanted to watch zombies, would also want to watch. Not the best choice exactly considering I was kinda dumb. I just copied people like Next Gen Tactics doing live commentaries over solo gameplay and poor strategies that could inefficiently lead people to around 30 or so. It wasn't good content, neither to listen to nor to watch. With a new computer more capable of running games and rendering videos, I made just a bunch of zombies videos since, despite being bad, it was what I wanted to see out of a YouTube channel. Someone making videos of any kind about my favorite game. This channel is also where the first "hello there" came from. It's a long-term meme.
Hello there. Hello there.
This was kind of unfortunate timing though. The Nazi part of Nazi Zombies was officially dropped once Black Ops 1 released a little over a month after I made the channel, November 2010. At the same time though, I couldn't really be sad because Black Ops 1 was what really brought zombies to a new level, both for me personally and for the rest of YouTube. Call of Duty Black Ops was the second game in the COD franchise to include the Zombies game mode. After the increase in map quality from Noct to Doris, and some hype gained through some clever marketing gimmick, Zombies was the big thing everyone was looking forward to in the new game. Nobody was really sure what was in store, and that just made it more enthralling. Kino der Toten and 5, the two maps provided upon release, had pretty clear purposes. Kino was meant to appeal to casuals playing zombies for the first time. It had a weapon designed for panic usage and wide open areas for easy kiting. With more lenient zombie attacking mechanics than World at War, this map was even easier than Chino Numa. Well, in some ways. If maps like this were all the new game promoted, I'd think Black Ops was pretty lame, but luckily 5 was designed with a different intent. 5 is the Pentagon Map, and its purpose was to appeal to the more committed fan base. Like Farouked earlier, it featured a lot of tight areas which didn't lend well to easy kiting. The only traps, which are necessary for high rounds, could be found on the top floor of the map, and that was not coincidentally the hardest part of the map to maneuver due to near unexploitable zombie spawn locations and no clear places to kite. The second floor, easiest to kite in, had no realistic options to kill zombies, and the third floor, well, nobody goes to the third floor. These were connected by somewhat random teleporters and a few inconvenient elevators, making for a challenge dedicated players sought after. And as should have been expected, both maps featured tons of new additions specific to Black Ops, like these gas crawler things. A lot had changed in this game, but the focus was still forcing players to survive as long as possible against ever-decreasing odds. Even if maps weren't designed for playing high rounds in efficient ways, that's what everyone playing them tried to achieve, and I learned that that shared mindset was ultimately what I enjoyed about zombies. I enjoyed the shared experience of playing the same maps as other people with the same goal, and as the game's community evolved, that led to competing with others to achieve the highest rounds. This connection was what I valued in Call of Duty Zombies, and that value was further strengthened when I personally came across people who felt the same way as me. Zombies had, and still does have, a community of players obsessively interested in high-round gameplay. My first experience with this was a Steam group called Zombie Whisperers, who were essentially the only PC players invested in zombies, and with the growth of my YouTube channel and eventually Twitch, I got acquainted with the many more players part of the Xbox and PlayStation communities. Through videos, these three inherently separated groups were able to form that connection I talked about earlier. We all showed off our high rounds through videos, while simultaneously sharing the most time-effective and safety-oriented strategies. Before I get too ahead of myself, I need to make a clarification. Even though I make it sound like I was one of these hardcore zombie players from the beginning, especially since I made a YouTube channel specifically for zombies before anyone else, it still took me a while to actually become a high-round player. A year after Black Ops 1 was released, November 2011, I achieved my first high round on the map Kino der Toten. My strategy was one of the slowest anyone had ever used, taking me at least 20 hours just to get to around 100. For reference, the fastest time to run 100 on Kino now is a bit under 8 hours, though the strategies used for that speedrun weren't discovered at the time. Regardless, it took me a while to get half decent at zombies, but as I improved, I was able to get my name out there more effectively. My YouTube channel was designed to appeal to both dedicated players through interesting gameplay and occasional new strategies, along with casual players through commentary in every video. Most high-round players never really put much thought into the entertainment aspect of videos. They were just showing off their achievements, and that was interesting enough, so anything more than that seemed unnecessary. I wanted more people to have that same shared mindset as us high-round players though, since again, that connection was what I valued most in zombies. One of the best opportunities for spreading that mindset was when the main face of the Next Gen Tactics YouTube channel, Spiderbite, took a stab at his first truly high round. He was aiming to get the world record on Ascension, the first DLC map of Black Ops 1, which was probably the only one he could possibly compete on. Ascension was the easiest map released yet. It also had the panic weapon Kino introduced, along with even wider open areas that anyone could kite zombies in. Skill was not a factor here, just patience, and both the guy from Next Gen Tactics and I took advantage of that. Spiderbite played his game of Ascension at a speed comparable to my game on Kino 7 months earlier. It was slow, but to the massive number of viewers enjoying his live streams and YouTube videos, that didn't matter. They didn't know that there were hundreds of players all achieving impressive scores with more well-optimized strategies, since that kind of video content was too obscure to investigate. Next Gen Tactics was part of a well-established brand on YouTube, known for creating Call of Duty content though, so Spiderbite had enough pull to attract people who usually weren't part of the high-round scene. Because Spiderbite was playing so slowly, I knew it would be possible to catch up and surpass him if I had the patience, especially because I was playing on PC. Consoles, for some memory leak related reasons that I don't fully understand, start to lag after performing a certain necessary action too many times. For casual gameplay, it doesn't matter at all, but when aiming for a high round like 171, the world record at the time, it was definitely a concern. Console players need to play more slowly and carefully when managing this inevitable lag, while PC players with different hardware don't need to worry about that at all. After a week of playing, including breaks for eating, sleeping, and sanity maintenance, I managed to make it to round 182, the highest round on Ascension. With a YouTube video detailing the strategy and statistics released a few days later, Spiderbite needed to update his goal from 171 to 182, and questions about why led a portion of Spiderbite's casual viewer base towards videos from actual high-round players. Coincidentally, there was another guy trying the same thing as me at the same time, though he only made it to round 180. I can't imagine the disappointment he felt after getting the supposed world record, then a few days later, learning that someone else had already passed him. Just 2 rounds. Sucks. Anyway, with all of the game's DLC released by this point, including remastered versions of the 4 World at War maps, I decided to set a new goal for myself. I didn't want to try to get world records on every map since I just didn't have the patience for that, but I still wanted to try for high rounds. My new goal was to achieve round 100 solo on every practical Black Ops 1 map. Practical being a necessary disclaimer, because Call of the Dead, the DLC that came out right after Ascension, isn't possible to achieve round 100 on solo. It just wasn't designed for high rounds. There's no weapon to effectively kill zombies as time goes on, and because the game resets itself after about 80 hours of gameplay on all platforms, that number being slightly variable between different maps, there just isn't enough time to make it even up to round 90. As you could imagine, this map was a huge letdown to a lot of high round players. It had a much different purpose compared to every map prior. Instead of the focus being on survive as long as possible, it introduced a new goal via a multi-step Easter egg. Ascension experimented with something like this earlier, but because it had no real conclusion or benefit, nobody really gave it much thought after a while. Call of the Dead's Easter egg, however, became much more front and center. Anyone who walked by a certain doorway would be made aware of it, and the reward for completing it made sure everyone would give it a try, even high round players. This was a step in the wrong direction, I thought. What appealed to me about zombies was not this Easter egg stuff, yet everyone outside the small high round community shifted their interest towards it. Later DLCs enforced this change in mindset even more. Shangri-La and Moon, while both doing better than Call of the Dead for high round gameplay, still focused on new step-by-step Easter eggs. The underlying story behind all maps in the game was coming to the forefront from here onwards, and the initial appeal of zombies was being left by the wayside. I get it though. It makes perfect sense for the developers to try out new things with their game, especially when it's so, well, simple. I don't want to bash them for trying to make their game interesting. What made me sad was just how much these changes affected people playing the game. Now that these Easter eggs were the main face of Black Ops, fewer people competitively played for high rounds, and that meant for a severed connection between all of Call of Duty Zombies' players. People just didn't care for the essence of zombies, survival against decreasing odds. They chose to play a game of quest completion, something I felt I could get out of other games a lot more effectively. Black Ops 2 was supposed to be the saving grace for the high round community. After a year of no new DLC, a whole new game would break the stagnant competition that was beginning to form. As should have been expected though, Black Ops 2 focused even more deeply on the Easter egg side of the game. Transit, the main map bundled with the game, was the worst map for high rounds I had ever seen, with its massive size, pointless side quests, and a weapon that only worked for high rounds by exploiting glitches. Town, Farm, and Nuketown, all smaller maps on Black Ops 2, suffered from the same issue as Call of the Dead. They had no workable weapons, meaning there were no-goes too. Worst of all, the PC version of the game didn't even have offline play. It prevented cheats by making sure players were always online, but for high round gameplay, players need to be online for days at a time, and when Steam goes offline for just a couple seconds every day, that meant high rounds were impossible. After buying the game and realizing this issue, I pirated the game because I couldn't play it. The pirated version of the game was better than the retail version. That's how much of a disappointment Black Ops 2 was. And so, I continued onward with my goal of achieving round 100 on every Black Ops 1 map. Even though it wasn't the new game anymore, it wasn't dead by any means. So many people were disappointed by Black Ops 2 that they went back to Black Ops 1, and all the people who enjoyed Easter egg stuff continued on with the new game. I went through the various original Black Ops map choices one by one, streaming them on Twitch to keep up my motivation, and managed to do pretty well for myself. By mid-2013, a year after the Ascension record, I had achieved round 100 on 8 of the 9 possible maps. 5, the last of those 8 maps I got to round 100 on, was proof that high rounds still had potential. Before I'd given it a go, strategies on 5 were abysmal. You should remember why still. The only place to progress through high rounds is the top floor of the map, where there are 2 traps, but spawn abuse is near impossible and kiting areas are non-existent. CJ Garoff was one of the first world record holders on 5, achieving round 92 before the game reset. That's around 66 hours of gameplay, only to reach round 92. Extremely slow. Eventually, a better strategy was developed by some guy whose name I don't remember anymore. They would start on the second floor, kite a group of 24 zombies, damage them, then take the elevator up to the top floor. Here, the group of zombies would pour out of the teleporter, which wouldn't have happened if not for the minimal damage inflicted earlier. With the group easily hoarded up again, the player would activate a trap, which would kill the zombies, then they'd run back to the elevator and repeat the whole process. This cycle takes over a minute per 24 zombies, and considering there was around 30,000 zombies between rounds 1 and 100, you can do the math. It's a long time, and the strategy is only really viable up through the early 100s due to reset time constraints. A very frustrating map, to say the least. Most high-round players avoided it because it was just too monotonous, while maps like Doris and the newly found strategy for Kino were as engaging as ever. I didn't really want to accept that outcome though. With assistance from a few other guys, I tried to revolutionize high round strategies on 5, and after some testing, I was actually successful. Let me describe the top floor on 5. It has 2 rooms separated by a purchasable doorway. In the first room, where players find themselves upon loading a map, are 6 windows zombies can spawn behind and break through. Only 4 of them are active at a time though, reasons for which are kind of irrelevant. The second room has 4 windows, 2 near the first room and 2 pretty far away. All of these windows are active once the purchasable door is opened, while only 4 of the 6 in the first room remain in play. Because these are the only 2 rooms on the top floor, spawn control shouldn't be possible. Conventional spawn control works in a pretty simple way. If a player is standing in one room, zombies spawn in that room and any adjacent rooms. Like on Verrucht, for example, this is a room connected to 2 other rooms by purchasable doors. In each room is a zombie spawn location. By standing in the middle room, zombies spawn from each of the 3 rooms. Then by moving just a little bit past where the purchasable door once stood, zombies only spawn from 2 rooms. Each room has its own zone, and that's how on larger maps, zombies are designed to spawn near a player. Usually, spawn zones aren't so close to each other though. Verrucht on World at War had no spawn locality, yet when ported to Black Ops, these spawn zones were activated, making for some pretty easily exploitable locations. Anyway, what I'm trying to say by explaining that is that no matter where you're standing on the top floor of 5, zombies will always spawn in both rooms. They're adjacent to each other, so that's the only outcome. Or it should be, but conventional spawn mechanics sometimes have exceptions. In most cases, they work as described on Verrucht. Stand in one room, zombies spawn in that room and adjacent rooms. But on the top floor of 5, they function a bit differently. By standing in the first room, zombies won't spawn from the furthest 2 windows in the second room. Sounds like useless information, but it was part of what sparked me to look for more spawn exploits on the top floor. I eventually learned that the 4 of 6 active windows in the first room could be randomized by performing specific actions, moving the elevator between the second and third floors, or entering the pack-a-punch room. There's absolutely no reason these elements should be connected, yet they are. I won't complain. From there, I thought about which window combination would somehow allow kiting at maximum spawn speeds, 1.92 seconds for a full 24 zombies at around 64 and upwards, and determined that based on the time it takes zombies to get from specific spawn points to windows, and by walking around certain objects in the first room, I can make do with only one combination of the 4 of 6 total windows. With a 6.6 chance of achieving that setup upon every usage of the lower elevator or pack-a-punch room, I could effectively get the correct window setup and run a strategy less than 20 seconds per 24 zombies. That's more than 3 times faster than the previous fastest strategy, pushing 5 from the slowest map to one of the fastest for high rounds overnight. This was the kind of thing that I think made high rounds special. Easter eggs on new maps may have well thought out narratives and intriguing puzzles, but are they really more interesting than a discovery like this on the top floor of 5? For some people, yeah, definitely, but personally, I'd say no. Optimizing high round gameplay is the most intriguing puzzle I could ask for out of zombies, yet the people who agreed with that sentiment are long gone from the zombie scene by now. I started losing interest in zombies pretty soon after Black Ops 2 was released. The rise and decline of hope for the game's continuation left me disappointed, yet I tried to do everything I could to maintain interest still. I tried creating World at War custom maps and just about finished this one plotting out an abandoned hospital near my house. I also committed myself to a few challenges, like playing games of zombies with no power or only in the first room, but just as it was earlier, the connection wasn't really there. I started a podcast too, which lasted for 7 episodes, the 3-hour-long finale episode probably being the only one worth listening to at this point. As a last resort, I even bought an Xbox to interact more with other zombie players, since most of them were on that platform. That was, of course, just a big waste. Over time, my YouTube channel slowed in upload frequency as I played the game less and less. I just wasn't interested anymore, especially because the continuing direction of the game was focused on elements I had no care for. My zombies videos, which did serve some purpose of showing off what I thought was interesting about the game, were mostly full of problems. Like, look, people say the way I speak in these Osoo videos is cringy, but I know that just means they haven't heard my zombies videos.
Hello there, welcome to Call of the Dead, Round 70, Co-op.
I also never really documented everything I found cool about the game. I covered a few strategies, but the people and the history of the game ended up getting lost to time, just as the same things did in Xmodo. Side note, there's some YouTuber named Nixaro who's been documenting everything I've talked about here, so I like that. He did what I was supposed to do. Anyway, a lot of this was because I only ended up copying other Call of Duty YouTubers. I didn't even consider the idea of talking about the community itself, and instead just stuck to the facts about what made up a strategy, how fast it was, how cool it was for getting a high round, and so on. Other commentary topics were just whatever came to mind at the time. I thought gameplay was more important than what I was saying, which, looking back on it, wasn't the approach I should have really taken. At least one thing that managed to survive through my gradual disappearance from zombies was my goal of achieving round 100 on every Black Ops 1 map. Still, to this day, I haven't uploaded a video of the last map I needed to complete the journey. I never uploaded round 100 on Knocked, the map that started zombies for me. If you watch my Osoo videos, you might have actually seen mention of this in the comment section. There's this one guy who posts on every video saying something like, "Where's Knocked 100, bro?" And every once in a while, I see it referenced by someone else too. The best part though is that I actually did it. I got to round 100 on Knocked over a year and a half ago. I've even got the 26 hours worth of recording ready to make a video anytime I want, though I don't really expect that to happen anytime soon. I tried between December of last year and February of this year to make a full-length commentary for the whole game. A big project, but considering it was mostly unedited, that meant 26 hours of work over 3 months, which is less work than I put into each weekly Osoo video. The final result was something I deliberated over publishing and chose not to in the end because I talked about far too many personal things that I'd rather not be on public record. And to be honest, I enjoy seeing the Knocked 100 when meme. It's a sign that some people still remember zombies for what I found great about it. Probably. Maybe not, but I'd rather think the glass is half full, you know? This slow decline in zombies content took place mostly over the course of 2013 and spilled over a bit into 2014, but it's not like I'd completely quit playing games altogether. With high school nearly over and Call of Duty out of mind, I'd found a new game to obsessively invest unhealthy amounts of time into. For once, I don't need to explain the gamey details. 99.9% of you are listening to this because of Osoo. You know what it is. I started playing Osoo near the end of August 2013 by influence of Chris, that same classmate who showed me zombies. His profile and mine were created a few hours apart from each other, and we enjoyed being scrubs together in multiplayer and competing for B ranks on normal difficulties. Considering I was pretty out of commission when it came to playing zombies, and I hadn't enjoyed playing any other games this much, Osoo became my new time sink. As my user page stats show, the majority of my play count was added up in the first year I played, and my most played beat maps are all some of the oldest ones in my library. I imagine my experiences as a new player aren't special compared to anyone else's. I sucked, I kept playing, I got better. At first, mapping was something I never considered. Chris, again, got into it a little bit and tried to convince me to try it as well, but I was content with only clicking circles for whatever reason. During winter break of 2013, though, I created this wood kid map, which I've used in tons of videos already, and got a guest difficulty from Chris as well. The difference in quality between our mapping was way too obvious. He made his map entirely through copy-pasting objects, while mine was just random nonsense. A problem for me since I thought going for rank would be a good idea. That's not something Chris had ever even attempted, so I had to look up all the necessary information myself. Despite how complicated it was and how much frustration its various details ended up causing me, I liked mapping. It became the part of Osoo I decided to focus on more than playing after learning a bit more about the mysteries behind the ranking process and how mapping actually worked. It was giving me vibes similar to Xmodo level creation, and you already know why. At the same time, more of Xmodo actually began to gain relevancy to me again. I mean, I'd barely thought about the game throughout the entire time I played zombies, but out of nowhere, some guy I played Xmodo with years earlier had apparently found me on Osoo. Convenient we still had the same screen names, or else we would have never recognized each other. Till Talus, who later renamed to Till, was that Xmodo player who coincidentally played Osoo at the same level as me, and both of us improved our skills at about the same rate, albeit he was a bit better than me since I focused on mapping more. For fun, the two of us went back on Xmodo's dead public servers and messed around a bit, leading to the eventual validation of the only map nobody's ever completed yet, the Sentimental Skyscraper Hollow Wings reference. Remember, that was Till's map, an Xmodo player who, 6 years later, became an Osoo player. Till is also the main reason why I have this flower as my profile picture. It's a sprite from Xmodo, probably one of the most iconic ones. Till also used an Xmodo sprite as his profile picture, which was our own sort of inside joke collab avatar thing. Just some fun, you know? Surprisingly, I crossed paths with a few more people I knew from previous games down the line. Some Xmodo players recognized my flower, and some zombie players knew I'd moved on to this game and somehow stuck with it themselves. One of them even got into mapping, but then again, he ranked Haramachi Clover, so maybe it wasn't for the best. Eventually, I started to move up in the Osoo mapping ecosystem, just as I'd done in Xmodo. I became a BAT, the former name for Beatmap Nominator, so I could do cool stuff like rank maps and interact closely with other dedicated mapping guys. A perfect role for someone like me who, as time has shown, likes to get overly involved in the community-oriented sides of certain games. My time as a Beatmap Nominator showed me just how much more engaging Osoo was than any other games I'd played up until then. Xmodo had a comparatively small player base, meaning there was little going on most of the time and nothing was overly complicated. Zombies, being part of a AAA game franchise, had a huge following, though I rarely interacted with anyone outside the small bubble of high-round players. This was a zombies community, and we had no say in how the game worked because AAA game franchise. Osoo was different though. It had much more opportunity to pique my interest with constant developer upkeep and a community always taking action. Being a beatmap nominator was part of that community action. BNs control what maps are pushed to rank, and those affect the thousands of players actively playing. It's like what I experienced with Xmodo, but on a 100 times bigger scale. Even though the Osoo mapping scene and its impact may appear small to some people, it was more than I'd ever experienced with both Xmodo and zombies, and I therefore enjoyed spending my time with this weird subsection of the game. You can then imagine how it felt for me to lose that role. In December of 2015, I poorly decided to nominate a TV-sized song, Cut at the Chorus, with only low difficulties. Nothing was wrong with the difficulties mapping-wise, but it was offensive in other ways, and punishment had to be dealt out. I was kicked from the Beatmap nominator group, along with the other nominator who promoted the map. Being forced out of the part of Osoo I found the most enjoyment from was a terrible feeling. I tried to stay on the positive side of things by still modding maps even after I wasn't a BN, but I quickly realized that wasn't nearly as appealing. When I saw a good map, I felt like I had to promote it, yet just as an ordinary modder, I couldn't do anything. For a few months after the start of 2016, I fell out of the modding scene and only put my attention towards mapping, but even that didn't feel right. I had a taste of what it was like to be a BN, and everything afterwards was sour. It was around this time that I put a lot more effort into playing Osoo. I went through every mapper whose maps I enjoyed and played through their entire collection, seeing how their ways of mapping changed and how I could transfer that to my own maps. This was the time I rose up the score rankings. I started around 15 billion score, earned over 2.5 years of casually playing, and then ended up around 50 billion score half a year later by May 2016. Pretty much every map ranked between 2014 and that time in 2016 was something I'd at least given a try, which gave me a lot more exposure to different mappers and changes in mapping over that small period. Out of boredom, I also tried live streaming a bit. I made a few maps on stream and gained popularity for the first few days, but it died down eventually. I don't quite have the ecstatic personality nor the skill necessary to keep a stream truly interesting, and without any specific aspirations aside from killing time, I gave up on it about 2 weeks later. In the middle of May 2016, my sister graduated from college. Being a special occasion and all, my family and I flew across the country from California to Massachusetts for the ceremony. The events of the graduation and family stuff aren't really worth discussing here, but what is notable is that Till, the guy from Xmodo who also played Osoo, lived nearby. We hadn't really talked much since he quit playing Osoo a few months prior, but considering it was probably going to be the only ever opportunity, we scheduled a time to meet up with each other. I took a 40-minute train ride from my temporary residence to a station near his house, and for the first time in my life, I met someone I knew from the internet in person. It's much different from just seeing someone's face in a picture or video. This guy I'd known since 7 or 8 years ago who I'd shared time with in 2 of my favorite games was in front of me, and it was a surreal situation. We hung out for a few hours, I visited his home, his mom gave me some questionable looks, then we finally parted ways. Given he was no longer a part of Osoo and we were both socially awkward to the highest extremes, I can't really say it was the most exciting time of my life or anything, but it was still something I was glad to have done. After arriving back home a few days later and taking my last finals for that semester of college, I found myself in a situation with a lot of spare time. The small company I'd worked for last summer didn't have a job available this time, so I did a lot of nothing. Most of my time was spent unproductively, and because I had nothing to really do, I was satisfied to just get one thing completed each day, regardless of how little impact it had in the long term. I knew I wanted to do something more engaging though. Lazing around all day and clicking circles meant I was carefree, but it wasn't exactly fun. Luckily though, someone sparked me to change my daily routine with an Osoo game Reddit post. The post creator said he wanted to see videos of mappers talking about how they mapped, and I thought given my video experience and excess available time, I would be able to do that. With my first video, Osoo Mapping Concepts, I was able to test the waters of how Osoo mapping videos could work. I should take a step back now though. What I just said makes it sound like this was an impulsive thing, but I don't really think it was. After seeing the positive reception of that first video, I decided I would try to make a video every week, and that was easy to do because I already had scripts for other videos written months in advance. Spacing Emphasis, Rhythm, The Editor, and 1324 were all videos I'd planned before I ever released my first Osoo mapping video, and they were what helped establish my schedule of uploading 1 video per week that I've kept to so strictly. During the second half of my summer break, I really enjoyed myself. I was doing something arguably productive with my time, and it was rewarding. Soon after, I reapplied to become a BMAP nominator, took the required test, passed, and once more joined the group in August. Then, in October, I made my way to the QAT due to what work I'd done with the ranking criteria over the past 4 months. By this point, with weekly videos throughout, I had well established my reputation of being that mapping tutorial guy. My tutorials were supposedly helping newer mappers with their mapping problems. That was their primary purpose after all. As soon as I started to run low on basic mapping techniques to cover, though about 12 videos deep, I realized that there may be more interesting things to talk about than just the essentials of how to map. Mapping tips weren't what necessarily kept me interested in mapping. It was more so the community and its interactions that kept me coming back. Everything about being a mapper, talking with other mappers, modding maps, becoming a BN, observing the mapping meta, observing individuals, observing changes in the ranking process, etc. All of it was stuff that I found fascinating. Too bad it wasn't easy to cover though. As soon as I started making videos with a different approach, I realized that they weren't as easy to produce. I couldn't easily get my ideas across, and because they weren't always agreed upon, I felt a constant overhanging fear that the videos would be worthless to a lot of people. At first, I alternated between tutorials and these more general videos every week. That gave me enough time to both grasp whatever vague topics I wanted to talk about and provide variety for people watching my videos. It was especially important that I kept production on schedule, since weekly mapping videos tied in with school meant for a lot of potential problems. For the first 6 months or so, I managed things pretty efficiently, but as soon as I transitioned into making longer videos after the ranking criteria one, I found myself working up to the deadline every week. My writing speed was slowing. It took me hours to record lines for each video, hours to edit that audio, hours to plan out visuals, hours to record those visuals, hours to make silly text and diagrams in Inkscape, hey, more Xmodo, and so on. Making videos became a stressful process full of frustration when things didn't go my way. Stress may be bad and all that, but I think it's been a great motivator for me. If people didn't like my video one week, I wouldn't just give up or continue making lame videos. I'd try to outdo myself, and in the best of cases, I would succeed. Some opinions on certain videos of mine may have made for a bit too much stress though. Like, according to some people, it wasn't the best idea to make a video with a positive spotlight on a banned user. And other videos make points with long-winded examples, which apparently makes for misleading content, and that's especially a problem for some people when Patreon is involved. And in one case, I made a mistake that completely degraded the entirety of the point I was making. The video I made on collabs talks about how much I enjoy discovering who mapped which sections of collaborative maps, and for the example I used, I was completely wrong. Anyway, yeah, by this point I was feeling more stressed than I was comfortable with. There was still definitely lots of positive feedback on my videos, but as any content creator knows, even the tiniest amount of negative feedback stands out above all else. I knew I shouldn't have been taking it too harshly, but subconsciously, the criticism still had a huge impact. With stress built up, along with the insanity that comes with sitting in my house all day working on videos, and an event currently ongoing in the Osoo community, I decided it was time to do something new. I purchased a ticket for Anime Expo. Now look, I'm an Osoo player. By law, I'm also required to watch anime, and I've been a highly upstanding citizen in that regard. But I don't think I'd ever go to Anime Expo on any occasion other than this. There's no people or panels I'm interested in seeing, nor any merchandise I'm interested in buying. All I wanted to experience from this Anime Expo trip was the part unrelated to anime, the once-in-a-lifetime Osoo booth. Along with Chris, the guy who introduced me to zombies in Osoo, you know him already, I went down to the heart of Los Angeles. We got our badges together and headed straight for the entertainment hall to meet both people involved in the Osoo community, as well as the people actually running Osoo. I had seen video of the area already, but as you could guess, being there in person was a totally different experience. In the area were 8 stations on which to play Osoo, along with a huge TV showing various Osoo-related videos, and, well, the rest was just a big open area. There were a few seats and some standing tables, all of which existed just to let people hang out and talk to each other. For me, that was the event. I was able to recognize and say hi to the people whose faces I'd only seen in pictures or live streams, like Chippy and Happy Stick. I was able to bond over esoteric mapping culture with people like Spaghetti and NyQuil, part of which was recorded for the Osoo Anime Expo documentary, though I'm not really sure if her audio picked up. I was even able to talk to Peppy, like more than just saying hi. We discussed the future of Laser, what new additions are going to be there, and some bits and pieces about mapping changes. Some people dream of meeting famous actors or musicians, but Peppy is the real peak of celebrity status. I really wish I had brought a list of questions to ask him, since I felt like I had so little to say at such an opportune time. It was also crazy to see that people actually knew who I was. I don't go around showing my face online, and not many people follow mappers anyway, but there were more times than I could count that people came up to me asking for a tablet signature or a picture together. That's something I never imagined would happen to me. My time at Anime Expo, despite covering so little ground, was definitely well spent, I'd say. It was an experience I would have definitely regretted missing, and I'm glad I was able to share it with people involved in the Osoo community, people running the Osoo community, and my friend Chris, who let it be possible in the first place. So, looking back, this whole podcast/video thing started off with my discussion of conventional Osoo video content, and how my content is out of the ordinary based on that. While at the Anime Expo Osoo booth, I was able to clearly comprehend and put into words why I make the type of mapping YouTube videos you see every week. For almost everyone involved in Osoo, mapping is secondary. Nearly everyone who paid a visit to the Osoo booth did so because there were players. The 8 available setups and live tournaments that went on are just further proof of that. Only a handful of Osoo players even think about mapping though. Mapping plus everything that's branched out from it is what keeps me engaged with Osoo, and it's why I've kept playing it after 4 years with no plan of quitting anytime soon. Because so few people are involved with mapping though, nobody really understands why I consider this game fun. While I prioritized tutorial videos in the past, you know by now that I've moved on from those. Sure, I've got some educational bits here and there, but that's rarely the focus of any video I make now. Instead, what I focus on is what I think makes mapping interesting. By making videos, I hope that other people can see the appeal of Osoo from my perspective. That's similar to what I desired to do for Xmodo, but never really knew how, and it's what I attempted to do for Call of Duty Zombies, but couldn't convey properly. Multi-hour long unedited videos or live streams of me mapping may be more interesting for some people to watch, and maybe easier to produce, and maybe more fun to do, but they're not ways I think I can effectively convey what I find interesting about Osoo. Being able to talk to an audience about each and every specific thing that I find appealing about Osoo is what I want to do, and it's what I think I've been succeeding at over this last year. Before my time making videos, most people were completely disconnected from mapping, but now, everyone who's seen my videos knows at least a few interesting aspects of it. I've been able to preserve what I care for most in this game by exposing it to people who would have never encountered it otherwise, and in some cases, I've influenced people to join me in mapping. This is exactly what I wish I could have done with games I've loved in the past, and I'm glad I could finally make it happen with a full year's worth of videos. So, thanks for watching.